It's 11:11 at 11. Welcome back. And this is our One Heart, One Earth Global Awakening event for November 2020. And it has been quite the November already, and we're only 11 days in. And I am honored and grateful to have with us Deanna Hansen. Welcome back.
Thank you, Lisa. I am so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you back. And I realized I'm gonna say this is Black therapy for kids, because this is what we're gonna talk about. I'm so excited about this. And watched your video on the presentation page, which all of you guys can find. And all of you joining in the live too, obviously you can comment and question all those things. But I'm really excited I was excited to find you this year. I mean, if we think about like the beginning of this journey to where we are now, it's really so transformative. And I just love you as this light being on the planet too. I think what you're doing is important, and this next step is even more important. So I just love you. I'm happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. And I agree. I mean, honestly, like the collaboration that we are doing together and that you've done with so many amazing souls, you are truly creating a path for us to move forward in the best way possible. And the world thanks you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm grateful to you, and I'm only beginning my journey with the work that you do. And I'm already like, oh my gosh, I just feel like it's so right and exactly where I want to be. And we do have a lot of new people to the community. So I will have you tell your story one more time and just kind of share who you are and what you do, because we have like 300 new people this week just to our online community, which is just incredible. So lots of new people. So I'll just let you take it away.
Sure. So thank you so much. And so for 20 years or so now, I have been developing a fascia decompression technique. And it started for me in an event of stress and fear. I was having one of the most severe anxiety attacks of my life, to the point where in that moment, I actually didn't know if I was going to survive it, because my breath was frozen. I couldn't catch my breath. And for some reason, I intuitively dove my hand into my abdomen. And that was the moment that started everything that has come from that point, because the first thing I encountered was pain. And I carried 50 extra pounds of weight and was still am, but an athletic therapist at that time for 5 years. So I was doing all of the things that I was trained to do, that I knew how to do for having a healthy, fit body. But the reality is I wasn't healthy, and I wasn't even fit. Even though I was running and I was exercising hard and I was dieting all the time, the harder I worked, the bigger I got. And I made some major changes when I turned 30 years old that supported my growth. And those changes started me having these anxiety attacks. So in the midst of this one, when I dove my hand into my abdomen, I had never really touched that area of my body, because that's where I carried the extra 50 pounds of weight. So I hated that area. Didn't realize it was storing so much pain. But on the flip side of that, as I started to intuitively explore in that tissue, I was encountering what felt like scar tissue. And as an athletic therapist, I always focused on deep tissue work. So I was very familiar with the sense of scar tissue with my hands, but hadn't had injuries or surgeries in that area to have scar tissue. So now I was like, no wonder when I'm coming home from a 5-mile run, dripping wet with sweat, my belly would still feel cold. So I realized no matter how hard I was working, there was no blood flow getting to that tissue to metabolize it. So within 2 days of just intuitively exploring, after that second day, I felt remarkably different. I stood up, I felt taller, and I went to the mirror and I looked at myself and I began to cry, because I was so elated that in 2 days, my belly looked flatter than it had looked in years, and years of working really, really, really hard. So that became this new approach I was taking on my own body. And within a couple of weeks, my chronic low back pain was going away. I was excited to wake up every day and explore the day and find more in myself, what I could do to understand. So I started flipping my patients onto their backs, and I started working in a similar way with them. And then I was getting some, tremendous results. From there, I started attracting therapists that I was training in my technique, but my real passion was to teach self-care. So it was about 10 years after that I started working with a tool, which now is the Block Buddy. Here's the Block Baby, the smaller one that we are using for the kids program. Yeah, you can show your buddy. There it is. And I have to say today, we just launched our new blocks. They are now made of bamboo. Up until this very moment, literally 11 in Winnipeg time, we launched the bamboo blocks. So I am so excited because bamboo is just a beautiful medium to use, same density as cedar, so all the same applications for the therapeutic purposes apply. But now it's a regenerative resource that, you know, grows 10 to 18 inches a day. I'm so happy we don't have to cut down cedar trees to make the tool anymore. So that's an exciting thing, but I digress.
There's got to be a way to get this up here. There we go.
So along the way, I really wanted to teach the self-care piece. And I tried teaching people initially with their hands, and there was some limiting factors to that. So the Block Buddy came to be as really just an intuitive way to teach people how to dive through the layers of fascia to get to the root at the bone. And the reason that we were using up until now cedar and now bamboo is because bone and this material are similar in density. And we need to drive through these layers of fascia to get to the roots, because it's those roots that block blood and oxygen flow to cells. So that is the purpose of this self-care practice. It's to truly melt through what is causing a lack of blood and oxygen flow to cells, remove that, engage proper diaphragmatic breathing, and teach people how to support proper foundation through understanding proper alignment in the body and giving really simple ways of bringing that into your posture so that we can continue to pull ourselves back to where they're supposed to be. Because what's ultimately happened is over time, pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. If we're not breathing properly, we start to literally deflate, like a balloon would be deflating in air. So that full balloon, I mean, think of what that looks like and compare that to a cell, because we want our cells to be symmetrical, filled with oxygen, light and buoyant. And just like a balloon that's full of air, that's what it looks like. But you start taking that air out, and then the balloon itself starts to become a little wrinkled, and it becomes denser and heavier, and it doesn't have that buoyancy. So we want our bodies to be light and buoyant, and we want all of our cells to be symmetrical, full of life and glowing. Where as we don't breathe properly and we don't understand proper alignment, we start to collapse into the space into our bodies. We literally lose internal space. I'm sure most of us that are older know that as we get older, we become shorter and wider typically. So this practice actually puts the space back into the tissue that time has taken away so that we can regain our optimal height. And with that comes space so that oxygen can freely flow into cells as well as other nutrients, and all of the toxins and the byproducts of functioning, the negative emotion can be taken out of the body. So we have a clean fluid system so that we can absorb all of the beautiful things that life has to offer and release all of the things that don't serve us.
Yeah, and it's so amazing. And I've said it like multiple times this year when we've talked, and even when we haven't, I've talked about you and talked about what this is. But I think for me, the biggest thing I've seen, and I'm just in basic land with the block so far, but the biggest thing I've seen has been with my hamstrings. I mean, that was the huge shift for me, was not being able to touch my toes, no matter 20 years of yoga. And I've gotten almost 9 inches out of my hamstrings this year, and I haven't even been working on it for the last month. I've really been off game there, but that came from working the fascia with the block, with some of the activities you gave us in the May summit, where you were doing the partner work, May or June, but it was the partner work one. And so I started using the block in some of those ways, and it's just changed that. So I'm really excited to see how it continues to change. And you have so much, the community and the YouTube channel and the membership, all these things, there's so much there. It's like, oh my gosh, where do I even start?
Start at the starter package. That's the basic place to start for everybody. And that teaches you how to use the tool safely throughout your entire body. It really brings in all of the basics. And then all of those other programs, we start teaching people how to use the tool in a more advanced way so we can dive through those layers and really do get to the root of the issue, as well as now we have our kids program that's also in the membership. And we're always adding new things. We want to keep it fresh and fun for everybody. Right now, we're also in the midst of our 7-week chakra program We have a women's health program. We have programs pretty much for everything. Block for Fitness. My nephew, he put a Block for Fitness program in there. So there's lots and lots of stuff. But what's really nice about it is it becomes a lifestyle because it's really, really simple to do. There's no skill required. It's safe. We do have healing crises, but that's where that community support is so powerful. So we're always engaging with the community, and the teachers and all of the other people blocking are in there to give supportive feedback along the way, which really is just, for me, it's the life breath of this system is the community, because it's one thing for me to say something, but when, you know, thousands of other people are experiencing similar benefits and having these incredible experiences, for them to be sharing and supporting, that to me is the point of this whole thing, because we need to support each other, especially now, going forward with what's happening. And that's why, like, I'm so, for so long, I've been wanting to get this kid stuff underway, but there was a timing, and now's the time. And so I'm really, really pleased. And I have just the most spectacular young man. His name is Finn. He's 11 years old, who is the star of our Block for Kids program, as well as one of our teachers, Jackie Gerard. She has a 17-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. So we just did a 17-month-old, a video using Jackie's 17-month-old girl, Charlie, where we showed parents how to engage your baby's diaphragmatic breath, because babies aren't breathing diaphragmatically the same as we did when we were born, because the posture of the mother today is impacted from technology and from growing up in a slumped position. The space has been, we talked about space. The space has been taken away from this computer generation and the posture that has resulted from that. And that is resulting in babies who aren't developing as well as they can in the womb. They're also naturally starting off with the breath of the mother. And we're living in a far more stressful time today. So the baby is coming out with a stressed breath, and they're not breathing fully and completely diaphragmatically. And that's affecting how they grow, how they evolve. So really simply, we're teaching people how to just really carry your baby around and provide a little bit of compression, the same concept as block therapy. And because your baby's nice and light and you're carrying them all the time anyways, it's really, really simple to do. So Lisa, I don't think that's being shared here, but that's free for the world to have. So I'll make sure that you have that video as well, and you can share it with your community.
Yeah, for sure, because I'm anxious to talk about this. We already have a comment. Nina says, my husband and I are on day 4 of block therapy, and wow, we are both experiencing immediate shifts in energy flow. We feel lighter and taller. It's amazing.
Oh, wonderful, Nina. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Nina. And listen, I got 4 kids. They are 8, 9, 11, and 13. And so I'm really anxious to dive into some of the things that you have to offer, because they are all on their devices. And one of the things that I'm seeing that I bet you're an expert in because of your background is my 13-year-old stepdaughter plays competitive soccer. And so she's always practicing, always, you know, it's a year-long thing. It's not just in the summer. And she experiences injuries and pain. Like, she's doing things that at 13, I think, man, you probably shouldn't have, like, foot problems and hip problems and things like that. And so I imagine that this is really needed for kids.
It is, and that's just it. I'm noticing, working on patients, that typically before, like say 20 years ago when I was working on patients, of course you would see the older generation as having the tissue that was denser and harder. And now that's not the truth anymore. It's the younger kids that have tissue that doesn't have that space in there, that fluidity and flexibility in their bodies. And that is why we're seeing this. But what is so amazing is how quickly they respond. In fact, I've been working with a 6-year-old, just a little sweetheart, who has scoliosis. And we've actually shared that on our page. His name is Zenon. And in 7 weeks, the changes in this young boy's alignment is just heartwarming. And it's just such a testament to how quickly the body can adapt when given what it requires. So, I mean, it's just such a blessing to be able to start this when the kids are young, because they're going to gain those proper habits. And that's really what they need. They need those proper habits now. And if they start integrating fascia awareness and proper breath into their bodies at a young age, the way they age is going to be dramatically different. It's going to be open, and I mean, just everything's different. Like, we're a different physiological animal when we breathe properly from the diaphragm compared to breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, even in the brain pattern and how we think, how we process emotions, and then from a physical standpoint, how the body moves, how we grow, how our systems work and function. So everything is connected, and giving them the tools when they're young is really just so profound, because they won't have to go through the aging process as we have had to go through it. On the flip side, they're going through it earlier than we did. So that's why there is such a push in me to make sure that I get this out in the simplest, efficient way possible, so parents can get their kids on it as soon as they can.
So how is it different? So is this something that, like, me and my husband and all 4 kids could do together? Like, are the practices the same? Are the blocks the same? Are they different? Like, what's the difference between kids and adults, really?
So really, there's no difference. I mean, except for the tool. The tool is smaller for kids.
Okay.
And when we did the first series with Finn, and we're going to be adding more series into the membership, but the first series we did with Finn is basically the identical 3 20-minute series we have in the starter program for adults. If kids can't stay present as long, that's okay, because they also don't need as much time. So basically, when we're doing this, it's all about melting through adhesion. So you can't rush melting. So there's, with adults, we always say we need to stay in each position a minimum of 3 minutes, because we want to tap into the tissue, we want to connect to the breath, and we want to create that heating. And it's the combination of pressure over time combined with that diaphragmatic breath that creates heating from the inside and the outside of the body, which makes it really efficient and profound. So with kids, they may not have that same attention span to stay in for 3 minutes, but they also don't need as much time. So it is the same process and the same practice, though. So yeah, as a family, absolutely, you can all do it together. And that's what we want. We don't want kids jumping on this without the parent understanding what's actually happening, because it's also about finding pain. I mean, we want to become pain seekers. Pain is simply the baby crying. It's the language that our cells let us know that it needs something. And what it always needs is care and attention. So when we can train our mind around a different concept of what pain is and the value around it, and then knowing what to do with that, then it's really the roadmap to a healthier body. So to have the parents and the kids all understand what's happening is really the best way to get through this.
Yeah, well, and I think teaching them, that's something that my husband and I have been talking about this year in lieu of this global event or global experience we're having, is how do we teach the kids to meditate? How do we teach them to do something like block therapy? Like, how do we give them the tools to be successful in the future, mentally, physically, emotionally? And a couple things. So one is, right when you were talking about your new bamboo blocks, it was 11/11 on 11/11. So that was pretty awesome.
Very nice.
So great. And then the other thing is, for everybody who's listening and watching, we are a proud affiliate partner of Block Therapy. So if you go to my website and Buddhist Biohacker's website, which is lisamgunshore.com, and go to partners, they're right on the top. And you can find that link and get your starter package or any of that. So do you have a starter package for kids too, or is that the same also?
The starter package for kids is actually in the membership, although we are posting it as a free event for anybody with the starter package on actually November 20th. And this was totally by fluke. I didn't realize that November 20th is International Children's Day. And by total fluke, we are launching our free series for people with the starter package for the kids. And then that's going to go into the membership. And again, it's because we really want parents to also be engaged with their kids. We don't want this to be a one-off program and to have parents not understand the process their children are going through. And then we also have the video that we're sharing here for free for everyone. Teach parents how to also use their hands. So what I've done is, again, Finn is the amazing patient we're working on. And again, it's not about block therapy, it's about fascia decompression and what that means. So there's a number of tools that we can use for that. But in the video, I'm sharing how you can use your hands on your child, as well as the block baby. And I also let people know, if you don't have a block baby, you can also use a hardcover book, a wooden rolling pin, anything like that, where there's just another thing to apply pressure, and then the combination of that in the hand. And it doesn't take hardly any pressure. It just takes a little bit of awareness of what to do. So that's all guided in the video that we're sharing for everybody. So, and what a beautiful way too to connect with your kids. And I mean, you can also apply this to adults. It doesn't have to be just your children, but when you're working with your hands on your kids, you're connecting to them energetically. It's all about magnetics, and it's just another way to commune. You know, it's a beautiful process. And when we can feel the changes from what we are physically doing on each other and we're healing each other, that's just another thing to really tie those bonds more tightly.
I love it. Well, and your free video, Fascia Decompression for Kids, is up on the oneheartoneearth.net website. So if you guys go to that website, click on Deanna Hansen, it'll take you straight through. We also have a link to a free gift from Deanna, which is her book. So you can watch the free video and get the free book and just get engaged, and it's so awesome. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. But so I have a question for you. So when I've just been doing the basics, but when I get to these sides here, it's like the worst. Is that the worst for everyone, or is it just me? I mean, it is the worst right here.
It's not the worst for everybody. You know, up here around the eyes, that is a spot that is pretty intense for most people, because if you think of sitting in front of a computer, most people are looking down, eyes looking up. The eyeballs will literally stick to the orbit. We get a lot of tension and a lot of fascia compression up in this area. So there's a lot of pain and tension in here, which is why we want to work this area, because we don't want that to affect our frontal lobe, pineal gland, our eyes, all of those things. The IT bands, the calves. I mean, basically, we're a mess everywhere because every cell has literally been pulled out of alignment. But there's definitely going to be unique spots on each individual that will be those major, like, okay, I'm feeling this. But that's the nice thing about having both sides tools as well. The smaller tool is a beautiful one to fit into those side waist positions where we might be a little tighter, because we should have, you know, I mean, for women, like the goal is to have that hourglass figure. But what happens is, because the rib cage collapses into the core if we're not practicing proper diaphragmatic breathing, that space shortens. So what we're doing with this process is we're creating that space again, that length, through melting those adhesions. And then that also assists in the detoxification, because the belly is full of inflammation and waste and a whole bunch of things that are affecting how the brain works, how we feel in general. So by improving that heat and that flow, everything becomes lighter and more free. So again, we can, our systems work more efficiently. We feel better. We don't have that bloated sense. It's really just the inflammation getting really congealed and thick because it's too cold. And that's the thing about understanding proper diaphragmatic breathing. When we are using that diaphragm muscle properly, it moves up and down in the core like a pump, keeping everything heated. And right below the diaphragm are the abdominal organs. Right above it is the heart and the lungs. So the action of that muscle moving up and down is like giving those organs a continual massage. And if you think of digesting, you know, for example, I'm just going to bring this down. So my stomach organ is right here. And I know I'm looking opposite on the thing, so that looks on the right side. So the left side, whatever, that's the stomach on the left side. And when we're eating, part of what allows us to digest our food is the action of the diaphragm moving up and down in the body. But pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. We're still going to survive. So those secondary muscles of the upper chest kick in. And many people are primarily breathing from these muscles. So that diaphragm muscle has essentially become frozen. And that's what I was experiencing in that anxiety attack that I had. My diaphragm was literally frozen, kind of like a frozen shoulder. So when we don't have that muscle moving on our behalf, all of our systems that require that heat aren't working either. Think of something like fatty liver disease. Butter at room temperature is a solid. When you put it in the frying pan and heat it up, it becomes a liquid. We want the fats in the liver to be liquid. But if that organ is cold, now we have the fat solidifying, and that blocks the liver's ability to do its job, which are many. One of them, cleaning the blood. So we don't want that liver organ to be backed up as well, because that makes the entire body toxic. So when we start activating proper diaphragmatic breathing, it really is a game changer in how every system in your body works, in your alignment, because that is the floor to the rib cage. So if that's not strong, the entire weight of the rib cage, head, shoulders falls in, and it becomes an incredibly powerful force in the gut, causing ballooning. So people feel, as I mentioned, we become shorter and wider as we get older. People feel it's harder to lose weight. It's not weight. It's not fat. That's not the problem. It's compression, ballooning, and then the resultant toxification from the lack of flow that really causes our cells to expand and causes us to gain in size. So as we start heating the body and the systems become that much more efficient, then we're much more efficient as well at releasing the waste, and then our size changes.
Every time I talk, I could just listen to you talk for hours. How long are you on your block? And do you still get on there and go, crap, there's like a new spot, like after all this?
Oh, there's always spots. I'm 20 years in. I'm on my block every night though, but honestly, I do the majority of my blocking in bed, watching a movie. I just like hang out in bed, doing my stuff. What is really cool is in time, as you become, so in the beginning, I would say it took me about 2 years before diaphragmatic breathing became the habit. But I didn't also have a system. I mean, that was in the beginning when I was just tapping into all of this stuff and trying to understand everything. So I recall about 2 years later, I thought, wow, I don't have to think about breathing from that place anymore. Now it's natural. So as those things become more natural, as well as understanding proper alignment in the body, then your system overall becomes more efficient. So now, for example, if I've had a weekend where I might have overindulged and I might have been lazy in past, I might have felt really sluggish and bloated for a week. Now within a day, I'm like back, so it's the system itself becomes more efficient because we're warmer. So in Winnipeg, where I live, I mean, it can get to be, minus 30 in the wintertime. If you're going to be starting a car outside, you have to let it heat up and run for sometimes almost a half an hour before it's like really ready to get going. That's really what the body is when we're frozen in our body. We have to give it time to get going. However, once it's going and that becomes your habit, you don't have to go through that process of warming it up because it's already efficient and ready to go in. Just like in July in Winnipeg, you can just get in your car and go. So it is all about the temperature. Tissue temperature is key. And the adhesions develop when the tissue becomes colder and it starts to form like ice crystals in a sense. Those are adhesions. So it's all about melting. And when we can really wrap our head around the fact that all pain is the further the cell is pulled away from where it should be, the more pain it really has because it's not getting what it needs. As it gets pulled away, it starts losing its shape. It starts becoming flatter. Those telomeres inside start to shorten, which is why we age. But when we start putting that space back, we start reversing everything. And that's the beauty. It's, I don't even know if the proper term is anti-aging, reverse aging, whatever it is. It's not about looking 20 when you're 50. It's about proper cell alignment. And as long as your cells are positioned where they should be, and there's proper space to feed and clean constantly and effectively, theoretically, we should be able to age without actually going through the process of what we understand as normal aging and stay youthful until our time is over. We'll see what happens though.
Yeah, right. I think there's a lot of longevity for all of us. I mean, I think it's the gift of learning all this information, and doing it. So my question for you is, because you were training for Iyengar alignment yoga, you're a fitness professional. How does this work with how has your fitness routine changed? I'm asking because here I practice yoga and I've been bicycling. And I always have in my head, I want to go be athletic. But it's hard for my body to do that. At least that's been its experience in the past. And so I'm wondering, I'm seeing these changes in my body in the last 7 years with all the things I've done, changing diet, changing all these things. And I'm noticing my muscle structure, I have more defined muscles and all these things. So I want to take it to the next level, but I don't even know what that means. And so what I'm wondering is, how does yoga and fitness and all these things work with the block? And how has your routine changed?
Well, all I do is block and walk and work on patients, and I'd hardly work on patients now because the world is different. So I really don't do much. I mean, that's the thing. I lie on this tool in bed. I mean, that really is a good chunk of my routine. I do love walking. I am not a -30 walker outside, and I'm not a treadmill walker. So, that's not something I actually do. So I used to be an athlete. And when I was an athlete, I was in a lot of pain, and I was compressed and ballooned, and I had a lot of issues in myself. I'm not saying not to be an athlete by any stretch, but because I didn't understand what I do now, when I was an athlete, I was driving myself really hard, and I was literally driving my body into the ground. I was so aggressive with how I treated myself that all I did was create so much compression, ballooning, and then again, like the constipation that comes with that, and then the toxification and the depression and anxiety, like all of it stemmed from my cells not being clean and fluid and free. So what is wonderful is, because if you love running and it does great things for you, we don't want people to stop running, but understanding the impact of any physical activity, anything we do repetitively is going to add up. And I was a provincial volleyball player when I was a teenager. So the number of times that I was a power hitter, the number of times like I spiked a ball and always rotating from one direction to another, that created a massive twisting in my body. I was also a Highland dancer. So I was training a turnout, which shortened my hip flexors, and it made a lot of challenges for my back. So the more I worked out or did exercise or played sports, the less I felt really free and good in my body. Now, yoga was a wonderful thing because I was training to be an Iyengar yoga instructor before this all happened to me. And then when this started, I realized that this is where I needed to put my time. And it was neat because it was my brother-in-law who actually said, what's the difference between doing a yoga class and like a block session? And I love that question because it really, shares why you have this change in your hamstring length. So when we're doing any kind of stretching, whether you want to call it yoga or stretching or whatever, basically what you're doing is you are keeping the tissue that you have available on the greatest stretch. When you're doing block, you're releasing the tissue that has adhered to the bone to create more tissue to lengthen. Mm-hmm. So then when you combine that with stretching or yoga or anything else, you are bringing more of your cells into action on your behalf. And when you look at my nephew Quinn, who's a bodybuilder, when he started, he was compressed and dense and round and had a lot of pain and a lot of tension. But now the approach that he's taking, combining working out with blocking, he's putting his cells into proper alignment so that all of those cells can build and expand, as opposed to he's compressing. So now you might have 20% of the cells working and getting bigger and bigger, and that becomes problematic. People that work out really, really hard, because of the way that we train incorrectly, repetitively, we end up becoming denser in our tissue. And that's considered, if you've got a really hard body, then you're strong, but you want to be fluid and flexible. You don't want to be hard and compacted. You want to be able to make that muscle and feel nice and strong and hard, but when it's relaxed, it should be soft. And for a lot of people that I work on that are like really into fitness, even in a relaxed state, their tissue feels really hard. So that hard body concept, it's not necessarily what we really want to strive for from the perspective of healthy aging with your fascia.
That's so good. And I want to invite, there's 22 people watching again, and I'm sure there's more because of these algorithms, but I love that it's a 22 on 11/11, which is 2 too. So I just have to say that. But please throw your questions for Deanna out. She's like a wealth of information. And in fact, Buddha Warrior said that. She said, what a wealth of information. Thank you. And Michelle Krantz says, this sounds right up my alley. So if you guys do want to get your block and get started, use the link on our partners page. And I was just reminded the partners page is not only on lisamgunshore.com, but it is on oneheartonearth.net. So if you guys go to our awakening page, you'll see at the top, it says partners and block therapies right at the top. You get a free book. There's the free video. You get this awesome block. It's so great. So if you guys are ready to get started, but do throw your questions in there because I'd love to be able to have you guys ask them. This is the time to do it. And so what do you think about awakening these days? Here we are in our November awakening. What's your thoughts about What does awakening mean to you, or what does it look like to you now?
Great question. I'm always so tentative getting into these conversations a little bit because think people are so charged, and I think that really what it comes down to is being. It's self-care, it really is self-care. And I think even without what's happening today, we were looking outside of ourselves for the answers. And I think that for the longest time has been one of the major issues in the world, because I always said to somebody, nobody knows your body better than you do if you understand the language of your cells. I mean, it's one thing for me to, work with a person, but I don't know how you feel inside you. So when you start to really understand your own body, what pain means, the messages, and connecting that intuition as you start to dive deeper through this process. And that's why block therapy, I find, is so profound in that regard, because what you're doing as you sink in through those layers of fascia is you are connecting to your cells that are deeper than what you are consciously aware of at any moment. So as you connect to them, you start learning the language of your cells, and then your cells give you all the information that you really need. So it's really about teaching you how to listen to what your cells are saying. And it's a different language than what we've been inclined to understand, because people are afraid of pain. And that's what the world has told us to do, like mask it, take meds, posturally avoid it, be careful if it hurts. And of course, we don't want to injure ourselves, but when we can understand pain for the value that it provides for us, when we have a safe and simple process, then it becomes, again, your roadmap to your most efficient healing. So I believe, awakening is really connecting to yourself. If we all can do that and we find that peace within, we make different choices, and that in itself changes everything, because it changes the vibration. When we connect to that parasympathetic nervous system and we get into that calm state, we emit a gentler, more loving vibration, and it can be you can affect people simply passing them, not even talking to them, just by your vibration. So if we all do that collectively and we look after ourselves first, and it's funny because, in a lot of minds that might be thought of as selfish, and especially, I'm not a mother, but especially for mothers, I think we don't put ourselves first ever. We put our families first. So, that whole analogy when you're on the airplane, I mean, put your oxygen mask on yourself first, then look after everyone else, because if you're not around, you can't help anybody. And especially for the mothers, we really do need to look after ourselves so that we can then be the best for our families. And give yourself time for self-care. And we do not have to aggressively beat the crap out of our bodies to get the body that you want. And whether it's a certain way you want to look, a certain way you want to feel, a way that your body functions, it's not hard when you understand self-care in a loving way. And it's really about being kind to yourself, being kind to your cells. I always refer back to that video by David Belinsky, The Life of a Cell. When you watch what one cell is doing on your behalf, and there's trillions and trillions of cells that make up a body, and one cell, it's like a universe of activity. And it always brings me to tears because it is so beautiful and synchronous. And there's no question that God is running the show when you see that. And you think of all of the things that have to happen just to allow us to get up and walk, let alone create something new or create a child. My goodness. So when you really tap into the beauty of our bodies and what they are really here to do, then there's a lot of forgiveness that can also come into play, because we have beaten ourselves up and we've allowed other people to beat us up. And, we just need to get past that. And we have to stop beating each other up as well and just love each other, because we hear it all the time, but that's really what it comes down to. No matter what your belief system is, or if we're divided, we can still be kind to each other, even if we don't have the same ideas on what things should look like. And when we start applying that in life, I think that's really what the awakening is. We need to love. And first and foremost, we need to love ourselves, and we need to love ourselves, and then we need to love each other.
That's so beautifully said. And we have a great question. Nina asks, do you think that my C-section scar could be the source of my lower back pain?
Absolutely. Any scarring from injury or surgery, scars become sticky and gluey. So especially at the base of the core where we sit and we compress so much, there's so much compression already in there, those scars will literally adhere to the bone and twist and torque. So as they do that and we become shorter because of the scar tissue, because as soon as scar tissue forms, there's no space in that scar tissue. So that will manipulate and torque you, and that's going to cause a lot of tension and stress in the low back. And we have lots of people actually. Lisa, I know you have a direct link to get people into our Facebook group as well, Block Therapy community on Facebook. That question comes up a lot. And if you even search C-section scars, you're going to see a lot of really awesome posts from people that have used the tool to melt through those scars. And we've even had some people, like, they've almost disappeared, like you can't see them. And I learned on myself. I had a breast reduction when I was 24 years old, which I would have never done now, because I understand the body very differently now. But I am so glad that I did, because what that did is it really impacted the way I was breathing. I was a runner at the time, again, trying to lose weight. So I'm running, but because the scars were adhering to my ribs, it was causing my breath to be really labored. So I became addicted to an inhaler simply to go for a run. So then when I started tapping into this work and working on my own body with my hands, I used those scars as a test, and I was able to free them from the bone and to melt them significantly. So that became, my understanding in my own body of how I could open up the rib cage and get back to proper breathing. So happy it happened. But if we can avoid surgery, that's always the best option, because as soon as we start cutting into fascia, we are creating scar tissue and adhesion, which really act the same in the body. I see that as being the root of all suffering, because inflammation, people often say, is the problem. Inflammation is the body's response to cells not getting what they need, which occur from scar tissue or adhesion. But if we don't know what to do with that inflammation, then it can become stagnant and it become problematic. So by understanding the process of melting scar tissue, heating the body, and keeping the flow going, inflammation suddenly becomes the gold. It's the healing juices that the body uses to deliver everything that the cells require to rebuild and regenerate.
Wow, this makes me think. So this is a vulnerable story to share, but it's really funny, so I have to share it. So, because this makes me think of this, and I'm wondering, and maybe the other day I thought of it. I thought, I bet the Black can fix this. So when I was 16, so I was a cheerleader, junior high school. I was totally obsessed with cheerleading and was a cheerleader, worked really hard to make it every time. And I was the kid who wasn't very athletic. So I had to work really hard to make it. Well, when I was 16, we had moved from a rural town to a big town, and I had tried out for cheerleading. And you wait for the call, did you get in? Because you only get called if you get in. And the phone rang, and I knew I was getting in, and I was so excited. And I ran down the stairs, and I slipped, and I fell, and the center of my butt cheek hit the stairs so hard. I cannot begin to tell you guys the pain I felt at that moment. And to this day, I have a dent in my butt. Like, no joke, I have a huge dent in my butt. And it's not cellulite. It is this stupid dent. And I'm thinking, is the Black going to get rid of this dent, Deanna?
Yeah. But isn't it interesting? Because when I was 7 years old, I was the stationary bikes back then, because I'm 51 now. So this was an old stationary bike, and it had a big metal ball bearing, and the tires, they weren't like this, they were really little. And my mother told me not to screw around on the bike because I was having fun on it. Right. So I wanted to go and play. So I get on the bike, and I was a really aggressive, kid. So I get on the bike and I'm pedaling as fast as I possibly can. And I slipped. My pubic bone lands on that metal ball bearing.
Oh.
I remember that as being the most painful thing of my childhood, but I also couldn't go and tell my mother because I wasn't supposed to be doing it. So I was limping around it and trying to hide it. 3.5, almost 4 years ago now, I finally got to that with the block. And as soon as I opened up that space and that pain, I'm like, this is going to take some time. So I'm about 90% better, but I'm still working through it. And, you know, that's the thing. When we have those injuries when we're growing, they're different than injuries that happen when we're adults, which is another reason why for the kids, understanding this process and understanding how to bring their bodies back and how to deal with injury and stress and trauma when you're young, it's such a different game. And even like when I would see young girls wearing high heel shoes, it's one thing to be fully grown and to shift your postural foundation off in a shoe. It's a very different thing to be wearing a heel as you grow. Now you're growing differently. So understanding these foundational components for growth and cell alignment is really so important. And it is just a simple way of getting your cells to rejuvenate in the moment. And again, if we give the body what it needs in the moment with an injury, the injury actually can become a huge healing opportunity, because the second law of thermodynamics is nature abhors a gradient. And that's something that if we can understand that, we can use that to our advantage. That's why with acute injury, even bone fractures, we're healing fractures in days as opposed to weeks if you get at it right away, because the body is going to do what it needs to do. And the first thing a body's going to do, whether it's a break in a bone, a tear in a ligament, a rip in a muscle, whatever that is, the body's going to send inflammation to go and rebuild, but we need to assist the inflammation. If we apply the understanding of the RICE method, rest, ice, compression, elevation, we're stopping that natural response of the body to go in and heal. And then that second law of thermodynamics still kicks in. Nature still abhors that gradient. So that gap is still going to get filled in, but it's going to get filled in with scar tissue as opposed to having the body rebuild the tissue that's been damaged. So we can really quickly heal from pretty much anything if we get at it right away and we do the proper things. But even if you don't get at it right away, like me, you know, 7 years old, I have this pretty profound thing. I'm still healing, but my entire body grew around that gap. So I'm realigning in my whole body. And what's so interesting is that my entire pelvis has changed because now I've got that hip in a better alignment. So now I don't ever feel bloated. It's weird. Like it's that hip alignment, everything is sitting better. So now everything is flowing better. And it had nothing to do with in past, I have that bloated feeling and I'm thinking, oh, what did I eat? Or, didn't I have a really good bowel movement or all of those things? But I've recognized, no, it's that hip was just in the way. It was in the way of the proper flow. And as soon as I got it to move out of the way, everything started to change and my entire shape changed. I'm so thrilled. And what I love about it too is, this was 16 years after I began. So the changes continue and they'll continue lifelong, and you'll continue to evolve and become more of the true self that you actually were born here to be when you keep activating your proper breath, when you keep putting your cells back to where they're supposed to be and treating yourself and your cells with love and respect.
Every time I talk to you, it doesn't matter how many times, you make me think of so many things. Like my chiropractor always has to put my right hip back in a spot. My right leg gets shorter. I have only scratched the surface, but I just love that I'm on this journey with you, Deanna, because it's just so what my body needs. Because there's a couple things that bug me that I know the block is going to fix because of what it does. Like my tongue's always swollen. That's a sign of my liver. My liver is a genetic. It's challenged genetically. And I've healed it. I have beautiful liver numbers. It's all fine. But my tongue's still swollen. I still have a crack down the center in Ayurveda. Those are things to look out for. I retain water. Like if I wear yoga pants that has a seam, you're going to see the seam every time. Jeans, whatever. Those are things that I know are not, that can go away with the right things. And so you telling all this is so great. And Michelle says a friend of mine wore high heels while she was young and had to have foot surgery later. Oh my gosh, you guys, I worked in fashion retail for 22 years. I wore heels 10, 11, 12 hours a day. And when I did the yoga teacher training 2 years ago, that was when I realized, holy shit, I can't put my heels down in downward dog because I wore friggin' heels forever. And the amount of length I've gotten by working with the block and working with some of the Iyengar techniques has been just a godsend, because there's a difference. When you go hiking, there's a difference when you can put your heel down when you're going uphill versus on your tippy toes all the time. No wonder my calves hurt.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, Deanna, I love you. It's already time to go. Can you believe it? This day is flying by.
I could talk to you for hours, Lisa. I just have so much fun.
Oh, God, me too. I just love you so much. And anything you want to share with everybody that they can access or that you want to share before we go?
Follow the love, right? Follow the love in yourself first, and try putting yourself first for a week and see what happens, and see if you don't feel more present with the rest of your family by giving yourself first the time. When you do, I really believe that is the key, especially again for moms, and not being one. Block therapy is my baby. So, I mean, I kind of relate in a way because it's really taken all of my attention in my life. But when you can give yourself that love first, I do believe that's what will awaken us all and really be impactful in changing the world. And as women, we need to be the ones guiding the way.
I love you so much.
I love you too.
And thank you, everybody who is watching. And Dr. Erica Risberg is next here at the noon hour. She is talking about body talk access for animals. And this is really, really cool. It's a really cool way to do healing with your animal friends. So I'm going to get Cauldron in here, my new kitty, and we're going to give this a go and see how this goes.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.